What's good, everybody? Old Papa G here. How we all doing today? And even though I know you guys can't answer me, I guess that's a stupid thing to ever say in a video. But nevertheless, today we got some more Shadowlands content. I'm really liking the way that Blizzard is handling things. I feel like they've been doing a lot of frequent changes. They may not be big nerfs or buffs, but they are doing a little bit at a time, trying to really get the perfect fit, I feel like. So rather than making them too strong or too weak, they try to do it frequently and like not as big of changes to really see where the spec will make an impact that's not too significant and still be fair to everybody. So I've really been appreciating what they're doing. One of the things right now that I feel like many players want, especially because I'm doing a 2v2 double DPS comp video right now, I feel like a lot of doubles players want to see 20% dampening at the start of the game come back. I really don't feel like this is so unreasonable. I could completely see the reason why. Healers are pretty much needed if you want to really climb the ladder, especially in later rankings. You kind of need a healer, and I feel like the 20% dampening start really gives the double DPSs much more of a chance. So in terms of that maybe happening or not, I wanted to make a video going over the top 10 double DPS 2v2 comps. I also did an honorable mention section. I really felt like it was weird leaving them off the list because they do perform well, but they're probably just outside of the top 10. So I did two teams like that. I figured we'd go over that briefly. You also noticed throughout the video that there really are a lot of hybrids. So obviously, if you're not going to have a healer, hybrids are going to succeed a little bit more. They'll be way more relevant in that sense. So you'll probably notice them a lot, whether it be Red Pally, Feral Druid, Shadow Priest, anything like that. Obviously, it's a hybrid, so if you don't have a healer, it's very helpful. And that's about it. And one last thing, if you guys like my content, I'd greatly appreciate any sub or like to my channel, and I'm going to keep bringing out as much content as I can. So, all that being said, let's start this off. We're going to start off with the honorable mentions. Like I said, there's only two of them, so it's not that big of a deal. And here we go. So, the first one we're going to do Elemental and Fire Mage. So, this is actually a really good making to a threes team. So, it would be Elemental, Fire Mage, and then Holy Paladin. It's one of the better 3v3 teams in the game. So, I figured it'd be worth mentioning for 2v2 scenarios because obviously if it works in 3v3s plus the healer, it definitely does have some sort of impact in 2v2s even though you don't have the healer. So, usually, double caster for 2v2s has a lot of risk, but this duo I figured was worth a mention. So, double caster cleave, insane burst, instant damage, can kill healers in a single stun lock. For Elemental, they have Stormkeeper with Lava Burst, Primordial Wave from Necrolords. And then, obviously, of course, you have the burst from the Fire Mage. Combustion is enough to kill healers in a single stun lock. Also, they have one hybrid, so that's the Elemental. Earth Shield's really strong right now, plus the additional off heals that they could throw out, and obviously their totem utility and support. I figured this duo was definitely worth a shout out, but I do feel like it's just outside of the top 10, and that brings me right into my next one, which is going to be Shadow Priest and Fire Mage. So everything that I basically just mentioned with Elemental and Fire Mage, Shadow Priest kind of does it better in so this duo is actually known as Shatter. Again, this is a great making of a 3v3 teams. You add a Holy Paladin and you definitely have a top 3 to top 5 comp that's in the game right now. Basically, like I said, everything Fire and Elemental do as a duo, this duo outperforms them in pretty much all formats across everything. So, whether it be CC, healing, durability, damage, this is actually maybe not burst damage, but everything else. Better off heals, and the durability with the impenetrables from the Shadow Priest, Dispersion, and Greater Fade. Also, better CC and longer kill windows, obviously. Yeah, I feel like I don't want to waste too much time on the honorable mentions because I'm going to go in much more detail on these specs in particular as we go on. As Shadow, you have Psychic Horror, Silence, Fear. It's a good 3. For the Fire Mage, you have 2-hit KO capability, depends on what you pick, but for Fire, with Radiant Spark, Combustion, and then Meteor on a single target, Followed that up by a fireball. Normally within that combination, you'll be hitting upwards to 20k on each one of those hits back to back. So as long as the Shadow Priest does its role and CC chains the healer or the other opponent, that way Meteor gets hit off on a single target. It's very doable. Whether they start off with Psychic Horror, then into a Silence, into a Fear, that's enough to get the job done. So that's all I'm gonna do on the honorable mentions, and now we're gonna start going into our top 10. So this one is 10 and 9, and you'll see why, obviously. So the main thing in this comp is going to be the Shadow Priest, and then you could either have a Sub Rogue or a Feral Druid. I don't really know which one would be better. That's why I just put it as 10 and 9. 8 and 7, you're going to see the same type of deal. There's one staple, and then there's like a sub in and out. So yeah. I guess I'll start with the Feral. Pretty much Feral's best duo normally, their best 2v2 comp, is actually with a Disciplined Priest. That's a top 3 comp for 2v2s. And honestly, that's kind of the same, now that I'm thinking about it, it's really the same exact thing with Rogue. Their best duo partner is debatably a Disciplined Priest. So the dynamic is about the same with Shadow. So for Feral, great defensive toolkit with the Shadow Priest. They have Frenzied Regen, Bear Form. Then obviously the Shadow Priest, as I just mentioned 2 seconds ago, Dispersion, Greater Fade. And then the great healing from Heart of the Wild. This really can survive most burst waves and can be rotated. Overall, the strategy is to use smaller stun windows with all your other CC to create a longer CC chain and, use these kill opportunities to finish the job. With Psychic Horror, now you have Bash, Maim, Silence, Fear, pretty much just to name a few. Now for Feral has heavy spread pressure with bleeds. And then obviously that's accompanied with the Shadow Priest easy dot spread. It's easier than ever, so it's going to be a lot of added pressure, especially in 2v2 scenarios. But they both also have heavy burst, which is obviously a big important part of this meta. Ferocious Bite with offensive cooldowns, with Shadow Priest, Shadow Word Death can take people down very quickly. And now for the Rogue. A little bit more setup based with all that I said from the Shadow Priest already. Plus now we have a Sub Rogue hopping in and out of stealth, using Sap, Kidney Shot, Blind, and Cheap Shot. Creates plenty of opportunities, more than the Feral. So I would say you're sacrificing a little bit of burst and gaining more CC and more kill opportunities. So honestly, that's why I couldn't really figure out. It's also going to be a little bit less pressure based from the spread of the Feral Druid. And both of these are definitely going to need a solid amount of coordination. Actually, everything in this list is going to need a solid amount of coordination. The biggest key is playing very defensive in between each setup kill. So as that's really the most important thing for the majority of these. You're going to have to play very defensive. Now, we got 8 and 7. So we have Windwalker Monk as the main one, and then Enhancement Shaman or Ret Paladin. Now, it's actually going to be funny, and I know it's going to be a little crazy, but this is the only team that Windwalker Monk is in, and they cover 8 and 7. Now, obviously, when it comes to 3v3s, or 1v1ing, or 2v2s with a healer, Windwalker Monk is pretty much the best melee in the game. It's debatable between them and Arms Warrior, and obviously they can't be off this list, but they do have one weakness, and that actually is their durability. So because they don't have a healer, this is definitely, in my opinion, the best 2 teams that they can work with, which is Enhancement Shaman or Ret Paladin, because of the off-healing capability. This team has a ton of burst opportunity. Like I said, you could swap either Ret or Enhancement for the same success. I don't really think, it's really hard to say which one actually does the job better. I think they're both really good. Enhancement or Ret offer huge damage opportunities, instant big off heals. The difference between the Enhance and the Ret is that Enhancement obviously is on a limited resource with mana, whereas Ret uses Holy Power, which is, you can keep getting. A lot comes down to the Monk, to be honest. Yes, they have the best damage, burst, and sustain for pretty much any melee, but it's at a cost. Play a big role in keeping them alive. For the Ret Paladin, they can use all their holy power on Word of Glory in between Avenging Wrath, their wings. and then go full offensive. Once that's off a cooldown, they could use Hodge, and then obviously they have the Monk's Burst to increase the damage. Now, for enhancement, their burst is just as lethal. You know, you have Doom Winds, Ascendance, Wind Fury, Shamanism, you know, Bloodlust. Their matches need to be more careful due to the limited mana resource. Both of these combo options are some of the fastest matches you could ask for, so if you really only have like a half hour to crunch time, this would be the comp to two. For the Monk, they pretty much want to incapacitate with paralysis and, you know, combo that in with Hodge or follow it up with Hex, either whichever you're playing with, and then both fully unload all their offensive cooldowns on the other target. And that's going to be about it for 8 and 7. So now we have 6. It's going to be our first balanced Druid and our only balanced Druid, and Sub Rogue, go figure. This comp really shouldn't be surprising to make it on this list, as we all know at this point how strong balanced Druid's burst is and must be respected. Big burst from Incarnation, Kyrian Invoke, and obviously you're going to want to pop your damage trinket. Can unload anywhere between 10 to 15k Star Surges consecutively, along with the excellent setup from the Sub Rogue. So, and as I mentioned with this one, we're not worrying about Night Fae and Convoke and Full Moon. That nerf, it's irrelevant. You're still going to use Kyrian's ability, which gives you a 15% damage increase and additional mastery. And as I said, the Rogue offers great setup for multiple kill windows. Surprisingly annoying to take down with, you know, off heals, Bear Form, Frenzied Regen. Obviously, they have their Conduit that instantly procs it too and makes it not go on cooldown, so that's really, really important. And then, you know, the Rogue has Smoke Bomb, Evasion, Cloak, and Vanish, the staples. This is also the first comp with double stealth. You know, they have their stealth openings, which is definitely a nice added bonus. Balance will likely need Heart of the Wild in this type of comp for the additional healing and let the Rogue handle all of the CC. The balance could also spam Cyclone on the other target. Obviously, I feel like in this case as well, since you don't really have a healer, you're probably going to want to use High Winds, the PvP talent, which is going to alleviate some pressure, which it's, was it a 20%? It's either 20 or 30% damage reduction once the target comes out of Cyclone. So it's definitely a nice added piece, especially when you don't have a healer, reducing the damage intake. Number 5. Top 5. We have Marksman, Hunter, and Ret Paladin. Before I start going off about this comp, originally I would have had Marksman and Sub Rogue in early Shadowlands or even in the beta with how insane the burst was and the CC really was. But with all the consistent changes, as I've mentioned, I feel Ret is Marksman's best partner for 2v2 double DPS as of right now. Otherwise, it would be a Discipline Priest probably. And yeah, I mean, prior to all the changes, they were literally killing opponents before they would get off their mount. It was just insane. I've seen so many videos of it. But anyway, let's get into it. Great CC setup. You know, you have Hammer of Justice into Freezing Trap with excellent burst damage with True Shot, Aim Shot. You could do this out of camo. And, you know, obviously, as I've mentioned already with Paladins multiple times, you got your Big Boy Wings, Avenging Wrath. Same basis for the Pally. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of emphasis on using all Holy Power on Word of Glory in between your Avenging Wrath cooldowns. Marksman's best thing going for it, without a healer especially, is the legendary Kraven Stratagem, making Feign Death a 15-second cooldown, also removing status effects, and, you know, this also creates the opportunity for you maybe to slip back into camo getting out of combat. It's a simple strat. You know, you're going to Hodge the healer into a trap, followed by popping all your offensive cooldowns and unloading on the other target. You're going to rinse and repeat until the kill is secured. It's going to be the majority of most of these comps, I guess, when you really break it down. Number 4. So, we got Shadow Priest and Affliction Warlock. Also a really good threes team, but, you know, there's a couple counters to that, especially being a double DPS. So this comp operates a bit differently from the rest due to the spread pressure being their main theme. Their main weakness is big burst melee and annoying Holy Paladin Shadow Aura. That's so cheap. That really, like, before it used to be like a niche type of thing, but now it's kind of like, it just decimates this comp. It's like not even right. But anyway, they definitely still belong on here because that's the only really exception. Shadow, as I've mentioned already, has great defensive toolkit. This is so important without a healer in place. Greater Fade, Dispersion, Void Shift can be rotated nicely. Also, great self-passive healing. I didn't mention that earlier with Vampiric Embrace and Vampiric Touch. Warlock also has some of the highest health in the game, and as gear gets better and better, so does their health pool. Also, great kiting ability, with Circle and Gateway. Mind Games and Unstable Affliction is where the kill opportunities come from. That's going to be your main damage. And you could do this with big CC change with Fear, Psychic Scream, and Psychic Horror, and obviously Silence. So I feel like this team definitely belongs within the top 5. Maybe you could rotate it with 5 or 6, but I feel like it's a little bit above them. Number 3. We got Ret Paladin and Sub Rogue. A lot of Ret Pally, I mentioned it earlier, the hybrids are a big deal, and even with the nerf to Holy Paladin's Word of Glory, I definitely feel like they're still very, very good. So this is an interesting one because normally you wouldn't think Ret and Sub would go together so well, but it actually makes sense in this type of tier list. Again, we have Insane Burst with Avenging Wrath and Insane Off Heals in between burst windows with Word of Glory. That's not going to change. Main issue for Ret is the mobility, and the Sub Rogue really has them covered. Crippling Poison, Cheap Shot, Sap, Blind, Kidney Shot, Shadowy Duel really helps the Paladin land their hits and get the most out of their Avenging Wrath and Divine Toll Mastery increase. Once the enemy team inevitably burns their trinket from these long CC chains, this duo should really still have enough left in the tank to finish the job. Maybe the Paladin saved its Hammer of Justice while the Rogue burned the rest of its stuff so they could Hammer of Justice now. Maybe he still has his Blind into a full kidney, and then just, like all the other ones, unload on the other target with Avenging Wrath and Shadow Dance. Can even play really defensive in between kill windows. You have Blessing of Protection, Bop, Sacrifice, Smoke Bomb, Evasion, Cloak, and Vanish. It's just a lot. So I feel like there's, without question, that's a top 3 comp. Top 2. We're getting there, guys. Now, I went over earlier Ret and Enhancement with Windwalker Monk, but if you remove the Windwalker and use the other 2, you got really something special here. I really was going back and forth whether they were 2 or 3, but you know what? I feel like at the end of the day, they have to be 2, and we'll go into why. So, not a healer in sight, but I'm telling you, as this comp gets going, it really doesn't feel like that at all. Insane instant off heals from both specs, mainly Healing Surge and Word of Glory. That's going to be their main heals. Ret could also cycle in Bop and Sacrifice to slow incoming burst. This duo's off healing is so good it could even go into deep dampening games. Really some of the best bursts in the game. And they complement each other well. As I mentioned with the Rogue, Ret's weakness is mobility, but Enhancement slows with Frost Shocks and Grounding Totem really remove the Ret Paladin's main weakness. Now for the burst, we got a lot. We have Bloodlust, Shamanism. That's basically how they use Bloodlust. Wind Fury Totem, Ascendance, Doom Winds, and then I've mentioned it so many times throughout this video, Avenging Wrath, Divine Toll for the increased mastery and damage. And then, can play defensive in between burst windows very nicely with Ghost Wolf, their totems, Hand of Freedom, Bop, Sacrifice, Word of Glory. It's just a whole lot. So I feel like with all that, I had to give it the nod ahead of Ret Paladin Sub Rogue, but it's really, really close. And finally, come on. What's a list without Sub Rogue Fire Mage right now? Come on. I mean, I'm sure everyone knew that this was going to be the number 1 spot. So funny enough, this list is just full of hybrids, and the number 1 spot goes to neither of them being a hybrid. I think that's so funny in the end. But, this team has been a staple as far back as Burning Crusades. It's a classic. And it really comes down to the duo synergy. Lots of coordination creates the best kill opportunities of any comp, really. Very long CC chains on opposing healers with Spam Polymorph, Ring of Frost, Kidney Shot, Cheap Shot, Blind, really whatever you want. I could keep going on that list, but it's just, you get the deal at this point. They unload on that poor other target with Combustion and Shadow Dance. In between their burst, Fireworks on getting Combustion backs with Pyrokinesis, and the Rogue has a wide array of abilities to prolong the game. The Fire Mage is very defensive, and very, very hard to kill. It's honestly one of the hardest specs to kill right now, especially even with being cloth. It's very hard to kill. You have Trirune Ward, Blink, Ice Block with healing as well, and their Cocoon from the Night Fae. This is difficult for any spec to really deal with. And then you also have the Sub Rogue CCing the Christ out of you. So it's just a lot. The Fire Mage also has answers for any interrupt. If you kick it on fire, it could use Polymorph of Ring of Frost. If you kick it on Polymorph, it goes back to damage. If you kick it on Ring of Frost, you can go back to polymorphing or dealing damage. It just always has an answer. It always has something to be clicking. There's without question. I also mentioned earlier, at the very beginning of this vid, how they have their 2-hit KO capability. In this comp in particular, it's actually really, really likely that they could get it off, because the main thing is making sure Meteor hits a single target. So, as I said, the Mage will do Combustion, Radiant Spark, and then Meteor single target, and then follow that up by a Fireball or a Pyroblast, or Pyro, whatever. But both could hit consecutive 20Ks. Obviously, that's pretty much dropping anybody, and that's not even including the Rogue's damage. But the Rogue really could just set it up perfectly, whether they use their stuns or blind, it doesn't matter. So there's just, in my opinion, there's no way that this team is not number one. Obviously, we know what it does in 3v3s as well, whether you're going to use a Disciplined Priest with it, or even if you're going to use a Holy Paladin at this point, it works well. It's just been good for so long, and that's it. Alright, everybody, so that's going to be it for today's video. I really did a lot of research on this one, so I hope you guys enjoyed all the detail that I went into. And yeah, if you guys are enjoying it, I greatly appreciate any sub or like to my channel. And as always, thank you guys for tuning in.